Step 1, look. Step 2, swirl. Step 3, note the viscosity. Step 4, sniff. 5, sip, don't swallow. 6, aspirate. 7, sip with air. 8, aftertaste. 9, take notes. And 10, pair with food. You just heard the 10 recommended steps just for tasting wine. Wine is a big deal. There are over 24,000 varieties of wine available, with massive industries and groups dedicated to cataloging the subtleties and the nuances between them. Surely with such a following, hordes of people checking, double-checking, taking notes, retasting, and comparing, the wine world must have something to it, right? Listening to Mind the Gap podcast, bridging the gap between your minds and everything else. I'm Mackie Drew.
And I'm Keegan Gwydolyn.
And our show today is called How Merlot Can You Go? And it's our show about wine.
I love this title. This is my favorite title of all the titles we've worked out for all the episodes. This is my favorite.
So yeah, this week, I kind of wanted to talk about this for a few reasons. I thought it was great. There was a lot, I thought there was a lot of woo around it. There's wine experts and they're talking about how fine this wine is and how crappy this wine is, It's a perfect, breeding ground for, things that aren't true. And there's a lot of health claims associated with it too, You hear, it's sort of like an egg situation where you hear in the media about, oh, it's good for you, it's bad for you, blah, blah, blah. So we really delved into, what's good and what's bad and how you can really tell the difference between wines, When writing this episode, I was like, I'm going to have some wine. I haven't had wine in a while, and I liked it more than I used to, but it's not my favorite.
So we've got 5 broad classifications. We've got red, white, rosé, sparkling wine, and fortified wine. And so reds, these are all broken down into a couple of subcategories. So I'll list off the subcategories, and then I'll give you some choice examples that you'll probably recognize. So under the reds, we've got fruity reds, which include something like a California Pinot Noir, Zinfandel, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Shiraz. We've got sweet reds, which is something called Occhio de Pernis, or a lot of bulk wines, which is like box wines.
Why? I was going to say boxes of wine. Okay.
Yeah. Savory wines like Chianti, Pinotage, Grave, and Fransac. So those are the reds. For whites, we've got 2 types, dry and sweet. Dry white wines include Pinot Blanc, Pinot Grigio, which is my mom's favorite, Sauvignon Blanc, Sancerre, White Bordeaux, Chardonnay, and Marsanne.
I can't help but to feel there's a lot of European influence here.
Yeah, I'm getting that, particularly French. Under sweet wines, we've got Chenin Blanc, Riesling, and Moscato. I recently had Moscato, and it is very sweet. It's a very sweet wine.
I'd like to give that a shot.
Yeah. Under rosés, we've got dry rosés and semi-sweet rosés. So a dry rosé would be something like a Pinot Noir rosé or a Cabernet Sauvignon rosé. And a semi-sweet rosé would be a blush wine, a white Merlot, a white Zinfandel, or a vin gris. And under sparkling wines, this is we've got white sparkling wine, red sparkling wine, and rosé sparkling wine. And this is just, more carbonation, basically. And this is stuff like white sparkling wines include vintage champagne, Prosecco sparkling Riesling. Reds would be sparkling Shiraz, and rosés would be a Moscato rosé or a rosé champagne. So this is your celebratory stuff.
Okay, yeah. Sparkling wine, pop the bottle, whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, you've got fortified wines, red, white, and nutty. So a red would be a vintage port, a white would be a muscat, and a nutty would be a sherry.
So why is this fortified?
It's just, I think it's often fortified with like extra spirits, like alcohol and stuff like that, or different.
That's cool.
Different flavorings and stuff like that, other than your typical grape.
Okay. That's good to know. All right.
Yeah. The other thing that factors into the types of wine is what's called the vintage. And a vintage wine is made from grapes that were grown all or mostly in a particular year and labeled as such. So when you hear people talk about like, oh yes, 1972 was a great year for this wine, they're talking about that particular year, the crop of grapes were particularly good for making wine. And that's what a vintage is. So that's what people pay a lot for, is they pay for a good vintage. It's not so much, necessarily the name or the type of wine or anything like that. It's the vintage that you're paying for. And the idea is that the wines change in subtle ways between years, even if they're from the same plants, just based on environmental factors and stuff like that. And the differences between wines usually arises from the use of different varieties of the same grape species. The typical grape species is called Vitis vinifera, although some wines are made from different species of grape or hybrid species.
Yeah, and cultivars are usually very specific to the vineyard.
Exactly. And so that's where, all these differences arise. They come from slightly, subtly different species of grapes and stuff like that.
I thought I'd want to talk about, like a classic component of wine, a very simple fact about what makes wine, and that's the aging process and what actually happens during aging. And, there's really two kinds of aging. There's aging with oxygen and aging without. And that's really an important distinction because when you age with oxygen, you get vinegar. So the idea is that bacteria introduced to the wine will eat the sugars and create acetic acid. So that would be making like a red wine vinegar, a white wine vinegar, a balsamic vinegar, something like that from the wine. And if you just leave wine out open to the oxygen, it will spoil it. In many cases, not creating a great vinegar, but creating just a spoiled, awful wine.
So is this literally how they make like nice vinegars?
Not quite. It's not like basically turned into wine first. It's sort of an in-between process of making wine and making vinegar, but it's the same process by which it happens, yes. But yeah, balsamic vinegar is made from grapes, right? So right. It is a similar process. The other thing, the main component, what you're really concerned about when you're aging a wine is the without oxygen rather. So you're going to be, you have a corked bottle or a barrel, something like that, to keep the oxygen away from it. And what happens is the tannins, which are in the skin of the grapes or the seeds of the grapes, is they're bitter components. It's the same thing that makes tea bitter. And it's the difference between, a green tea or a black tea. There's more tannins in a black tea. And
Mackie is the resident tea expert. He knows. He's forgotten more things about tea than I will ever know.
So the idea here is when tannins are left alone to age for, 10, 20, 30 years, they become long polymers and they become less noticeable by your taste buds. The difference between a long carbohydrate and a sugar, a simple sugar, you can taste simple sugar much more strongly. Right. It's the same sort of situation. So they combine into long polymers. And
that's very interesting.
Yeah. So the idea is that, a red wine actually would be better at it because it contains more tannins. So it would improve more with age. Right. Well, white wine generally wouldn't have as many tannins and it wouldn't aging wouldn't affect it nearly as much. So that's a general split. There's another split, however, with respect to how you seal the bottles. So a lot of the work done for aging is done in bottles, already bottled. And the idea is whether you use a cork or a screw cap. The screw caps are newer, right?
Right.
So people have problems with it. There's a lot of history to wine. It's like it's like the cradle of culture in a lot of aspects. Yeah. And
I remember hearing some anthropologists say that the sign of a civilization, like the classification for civilization, is if you have discovered how to make alcohol.
That's funny.
So.
I could see that. Well, some people at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea is corks actually do let some air through. and it's minimal, but eventually wine with corked bottles will eventually all turn to vinegar. So it can be hundreds of years, but it will turn to vinegar. Right. Screw caps are extremely airtight, and they generally don't let any air in, so it will not let it spoil. But some people think it's there's less subtlety and nuance and whatnot, it's losing some sort of feel, and I think it's more like a vinyl thing, even though digital music can exactly mimic the vinyl records as far as our ears can distinguish. Yeah. Some people still prefer vinyl for, I guess, feel
nostalgic reasons.
Yeah. So I think it's mostly like, bull, but it's whatever floats your boat, right? It's not a big deal, but screw caps do seem to be superior for keeping oxygen out of the wine. It's
interesting. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought that like a screw cap is it's sort of like just a cheaper alternative, and that's why it's popular.
It feels cheaper, but it's not. It probably is like expense wise cheaper, but it's just generally better.
Do you know anything about the? I know there's a practice where you cork the bottle. But then you also like seal it with wax. Would that?
Yes, that would improve the seal for sure.
Yeah,
certainly. It's also it's sort of like when you get something at a store and it's like got an extra seal around it.
Yeah,
and you're like, this has not been tampered with.
Yeah.
And if you were to buy a spice or something,
quality control seal.
Exactly, it's like that. As when they stamp the top with their seal, it's like when this left our facility, it was perfect.
Yeah.
Whatever happened after the fact, that's not up to us.
Wine tasting is a big deal. People, there's an entire industry, multiple industries based around making a superior tasting wine. And wine tasting gets, pretty pretentious pretty quickly and all this stuff. And people claim to be wine experts and claim to be able to tell you what's good with what and what not to buy and what to buy and all this stuff. So you have to ask the question, is wine tasting legitimate? So in 2001, 54 wine experts were invited to participate in a study on wine tasting, and they were presented with two entirely different glasses of wine, one red, one white, and they were asked to write a wine tasting review. They described the red wine as you'd expect, with descriptors such as jammy, burgundy, ruby. They referred often to its crushed red fruit, and generally the words they used were very, very congruous with typical red wine reviews.
Mm-hmm.
None of the experts picked up on the fact that it was not a red wine. It was a white wine, which was dyed with food coloring.
Oh my god. I would love to see the reactions.
Like many other studies, this one corroborates the finding that we don't taste with our mouths in isolation. The sensation of taste comes from a variety of inputs, and it's influenced by our biases and our perceptions. So you have to remember that people will split hairs over this and say, oh, by taste we mean that whole sensation. But taste in the strictest sense, we can only taste 5 different things, maybe 6. It's our sense of smell that contributes most of the the ability to distinguish between different tastes. So it's not just our mouth, and it's also, like I said, our biases and our perceptions. There was a similar study in which wine experts were presented with identical wines in differently priced bottles. So, one was in like a box, say, and the other one was in like some fancy bottle. And the study showed that wine experts could not only identify that the wines were the same, but they rated them as opposites of each other. So they rated the boxed wine as like, very cheap, very bland and harsh and unrefined. And they rated the, fancy bottle as like, sophisticated and spectacular and all this stuff. And they were the same wine.
I wonder how much of this is not their actual perception, but what they want to put out into the world, If they're seen like enjoying a crappy wine, maybe their opinion carries less weight in the wine world, right?
The other thing is there have been numerous wine experts, like wine tasters, who write for these journals dedicated to wine tasting, who have said, yeah, it's all BS. We're just making it up.
I think, in doing the research for this episode, I came across a lot of people who were like, on that side. You know, their career is made in wine, and they agree that it's not about what these experts say. It's about, you know, what you enjoy wine wise. So if you enjoy the $1.50 bottle of wine, then go for it.
Yeah. So, you know, all these studies suggest that wine tasting is not terribly legitimate. In fact, another study showed that if you base just on the taste of the wine, the average person preferred a cheap wine to an expensive one. So just drink what you think tastes good and forget all that pretense.
Yeah, don't have to impress anybody. If you really care, if you really want to impress, take a cheap wine and put it in an expensive bottle.
Exactly.
Nobody will call you on it, I promise. Oh, so yeah, the wine is not just cultural, right? It's, you know, used as a health claim, basically. Is people come all the time with claims of how the wine does this week and this another week and whatnot, and red wine versus white wine and whatnot. So I actually looked into what the actual evidence suggests.
Nice.
You know, my dad loves the wine. He's like, this is like his thing. He does it for health. He's like, this is my vitamin. This is what I take. And I'm like, well, I don't know. You shouldn't make a wonder cure out of it, you know? It's not a panacea.
Of course.
So I kind of made a little bit of categories for how legitimate the research is and what the claims actually are. So on the good side of things, it very clearly lowers the risk of ulcers. It kills the Heliobacter bacteria.
Right.
And it will, but that's true of any alcohol. So that's not specific to wine or white wine or red wine. So all
Makes
alcohol
sense.
will do that. And all of these claims, by the way, they're based on moderate consumption, not binge drinking. So
Right.
if you're binge drinking, you can obviously come across much more worse problems. But these are based on benefits you can get if you just drink moderately. And you can check out, there's a Wikipedia page about which types of alcohol, correlate with how much counts as moderate, and that's what most studies would be based on. So you can take a look for that.
Nice.
But so here are some things that it might do. It might lower the risk of type 2 diabetes. It might help ward against macular degeneration. It might lower heart disease risk. It might help with weight management, and it also might help ward off dementia. So those are some good things that it might be able to do, but these are, you know, based. Sorry, another one. It might lower risk of lung, ovarian, and prostate cancer.
Oh,
so you know, it's got some good stuff to it. It's fair. You know, if even half of those things come out as like verified, then that would be a great thing for it to do. But most of these things are based on either white or red. It's not a matter of whether red. A lot of people say it's red wine only. It shouldn't matter. The only thing. The actual active components of this wouldn't matter between the wines.
right. Unless it's the tannins.
It's not. No, most of these claims are not about tannins, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. But a fun correlation I found, wine drinkers, on average, have 18-point higher IQ than beer drinkers.
That seems pretty socially biased.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. It's a correlation. It's not like, this gives you power. It's that people who tend to have higher IQs tend to drink wine is likely the case, or travel in circles that drink wine and then become wine drinkers. You know.
Yeah.
Now here are bad things wine does. There's two sides to every story. This is the bad side of wine.
And is this you're obviously not going to be like, oh yes, if you drink too much wine, you're gonna
you'll get alcohol poisoning. No, this is stuff that happens regardless of based on moderate consumption. There are some conflicting studies about heavy metal contents in wine. So it may be high in heavy metals, but there's a lot of overreaction to this, and you really shouldn't worry as far as we can tell right now. So that's just, sort of a maybe in the bad section. But yeah, as with all alcohol consumption, it can cause bone mineral density loss, and it's found to hurt women's bone mineral density, but for some reason, as studied in wine, it increased male bone mineral density. So
that's weird.
Yeah, I know. I thought that was weird, but it's pretty legit. It's a good study. I have no idea why, but that's the case. So, it also can cause headaches. It can set off migraines, and it actually may increase the rate of memory loss. If you're already having memory loss problems, it may increase the loss. But it also is often claims to help control blood sugar levels, and that's not the case. That's not a bad thing. It's just,
it's just not true.
Not true, exactly.
Gotcha.
So that's basically my general summary about wine and health, and I'm sure there are 1,000 more claims out there, but those are the things I could find actual good research for. So,
right. And it seems like most things where it's got about the same number of pros and cons. You know?
Exactly.
So, don't use a health reason as an excuse to drink. It's not legitimate.
Yeah, you can just say I want to drink.
Yeah. That's
All right.
valid. All right, I've got some wine trivia. So just some interesting stuff I found about wines. The most expensive bottle of wine ever sold was a bottle of 1947 Chateau Cheval Blanc, which sold at auction at an auctioneer called Christie's in Geneva for $304,375.
Wow, in 1947 dollars too.
No. This was recently.
Oh.
The
I
bottle,
see.
The bottle was
was
from
old.
1947.
Okay.
Yeah. The vintage was 1947. The oldest bottle of wine. So, in 1867, the tomb of a Roman noble near the German city of Speyer was opened. And with him was found the oldest bottle of wine that we know of. And it dates back to about 350 AD, which places the bottle about 1,650 years old. It's still sealed with wax and is currently on display in the Pfalz Historical Museum in Germany.
So I wonder what it tastes like.
Well, that's the thing. They've been thinking of like uncorking it and doing some like mass spectrometry and stuff on it, but it's obviously very, very controversial.
I bet it's probably vinegar by now.
Might be.
Could be. Depends how well they sealed it, but yeah.
The other thing that I thought I could talk about briefly, just because I learned this past week in medical school, is one of the telltale ways of knowing if someone is a heavy drinker.
Oh?
So if you do a liver biopsy on someone who drinks heavily, you will always see what's called fatty liver cells. And you'll see big white droplets of fat in all these liver cells if you take a biopsy. And that's like the only cause of this symptom called fatty liver.
Huh. Well, I mean, that'll help next time I'm doing a liver biopsy.
Exactly. And the other thing is you can tell that if they've been drinking recently as well, because this condition goes away within a week of you stopping drinking.
Wow. That's cool. Huh.
And the fatty liver is actually a symptom of distress. So when liver cells are limping, basically, they're damaged, they're having trouble, they start accumulating fat like this because they can't properly transport fat out of the liver.
All right. So this is a fun story. I was like looking up new stuff for the show, and I don't remember what my actual segment was supposed to be, but I switched it immediately as soon as I heard this story. So, there's like we've been talking about, there's a lot of crap surrounding these niche markets, people claiming to have the holy grail of wine or, awards, things like that. And back in 2008, a man by the name of Robin Goldstein was working on a paper for the Journal of Wine Economics, which is a thing. A specific journal for wine economics. And during his research, he really wanted to find out what it took to get a wine award. So he set out on a quest. He didn't have a restaurant, but he made one. He invented one out of thin air, and he didn't actually make the restaurant. What he did is he picked a name, the Osteria L'Intrepido, and he set up as a family restaurant in Italy. He set up a voicemail saying that they were on vacation, and he submitted the restaurant for evaluation to a wine magazine, the Wine Spectator. He paid their $250 fee to be evaluated, and he posted a fake wine menu on the internet. The thing is, he filled this wine menu with all of the worst wines out of Italy that they've picked in the last 20 years. So he picked
that journal has picked.
Yes, that it's not a journal, it's a magazine. But
sorry.
Yeah, the Wine Spectator magazine, it picked these over the last 20 years as the worst wines. And as you can probably guess by now, he won the award. He won the Wine Spectator Award of Excellence. And here's the description that the Wine Spectator describes on their website. Our basic award for a list that offer a well-chosen selection of quality producers, along with a thematic match to the menu and in both price and style. But it's likely a scam. So basically, he said when he went to them, he got an award with the worst menu he could have picked.
Right.
And he was immediately offered advertising opportunities in that magazine. So it's like a marketing thing is likely what it is.
Right.
But they actually responded in several points. So this is a big media story at the time. So they had to come up with a public response. And basically they said they called the restaurant multiple times, and each time they got an answering machine from a person purporting to be the restaurant owner, and it was going to be closed at the moment. When they Googled the restaurant, it turned up an actual address. When the restaurant sent them a link to their website that had its menu, and on the website, diners were claiming to have eaten there. So he had set up fake
That's
restaurant
hilarious.
reviews. So they didn't vet him. That's the thing. These are the ways they're responding. They're saying, "Oh, these are all the reasons why we were fooled." But we know you were fooled.
Yeah.
Like, of course, you didn't do your job, and I don't think that was very good of them.
So is this the fee to be evaluated supposed to be for them to physically go to the restaurant and try the wines?
They aren't specific about it. They just give us money and then we'll evaluate you. So they weren't being explicit about that. No, but
they obviously didn't do it in this case. But I'm wondering if they did it in other cases or something.
Fair enough. Yeah, it could have been. But this is the only study we've gotten to the inner workings of that. But I thought that was really funny. He's fooled this system. So he was trying to show that wine awards aren't worth anything.
Yeah.
They're worth as much money as the magazine can make. And, I think that people should have felt more betrayed by the magazine by this. But, I went onto their forum when this story was breaking and I saw people constantly defending them.
Of course. And I'm sure that there will be people who listen to this and dislike us because they are wine fans and they enjoy,
I don't think we've said anything out of the ordinary. We've defended wine and that it tastes fine. There are differences in some wines. It's got some health benefits. We're being as fair as we can.
Yeah.
We don't have much exposure to wine. We're coming into this is a neutral party, and we're just telling you what we found.
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess
don't shoot the messenger.
Exactly. I guess that's the end of the show's main section. Why don't we head off to the game section then?
I'm excited. Hello and welcome to our game section. So, we have given our thoughts on wine. Both Mackie and I are not huge fans. But what kind of alcohol is your favorite, Mackie?
Well, I'm not really when I was in high school and, I was a big, I went out and I drank and did all that party stuff, but I've fallen out of favor drinking wise. I'm not really a big fan anymore, but when I do drink, I generally drink Johnny Walker in whatever form I can afford at the time as a starving student.
Fair enough.
I drink it neat, just Johnny Walker in a glass. That's how I like it. How about you?
Well, I was never really into alcohol. You actually got me into alcohol on... What was it? Shortly after Christopher Hitchens died?
Yeah. Christopher Hitchens was one of our we were a big fan, so to speak, and his favorite drink was Johnny Walker Black. So we bought some Johnny Walker Black as a memorial, and we've been on it ever since, I suppose.
So that's mine. I really dislike going down to the red. It really is. I don't know.
Yeah.
After all this wine tasting bashing, I feel a little bit hypocritical, but I feel like I can taste the difference between black and red.
We did extremely unscientific studies where we did blind tastes, but I don't want to make any too outrageous claims about that.
Yeah, but black is my preferred as well, and I like it on ice.
All right, so I guess it's time for the 5-minute challenge then.
Yeah, so I'll explain the rules briefly. 5-minute challenge is when one of us challenges the other to learn as much as possible about a given topic in 5 minutes of research only. And last week 2 weeks ago, I challenged Mackie to learn as much as possible about gravitational lensing. So what did you find, Mackie?
All right, so I did this study between 3:24 p.m. and 3:29 p.m.
All right.
And I basically got a kind of outline on it. So the idea is gravitational lensing is when light bends around a disturbance of matter. And it was a prediction made by Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity. Fritz Zwicky posited in 1937 that the effect would allow galaxy clusters to act as gravitational lenses. And it was not until 1979 that the effect was confirmed by the observation of the so-called twin QSO. There's 3 categories of lensing: strong, weak, and micro lensing. And gravity also, a note on this, gravity also affects momentum, and that's why a massless particle, is affected. And Einstein published a paper about it in 1936 in the journal Science. That's what I got.
Cool.
5 minutes.
Is that what you got?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll just expand a little bit. The reason that this works and what it really is the ability for massive objects to influence the path of light with their gravity. So we're talking about objects whose gravity is so strong that it actually bends the path of light. In elementary school, they always tell you that light travels in straight lines. Well, that's not necessarily true. If a photon of light or a beam of light is passing close to and going past a very massive object, the gravity will actually grab hold of that light and bend it inwards towards the center of gravity, right? So this means that it's like a way you can see things that are behind other things. You get some really interesting patterns. In fact, there's a pattern called Einstein's Cross. And this is a pattern that you see when you're looking at a single object on the other side of a very, very large mass. And it's because the light, once it's bent around this large object, forms 4 identical images.
Oh, weird.
It's one object, but it's 4 images of the same object. And the gravity is bent such that they form these 4 different images. You get other interesting patterns as well.
As if astronomy wasn't hard enough without having to worry about...
Exactly. So it's a really cool effect, and it's something that I like, which is taking a property that you think is constant and unchanging and turning it on its head.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that gravity only affects mass, too. That's what's taught in school.
Right.
So, yeah, no, that's a good thing to know. All right, yeah. Cool. So, I'm challenging you this week, and I'm going to challenge you to the food, chili, not the country, the food.
Okay.
All right,
chili.
cool. Yeah, so...
You got a quiz for me?
I do have a quiz for you, something I'm very excited about. So the idea here, when I was doing research for the show, I came across a lot of drinks that could pass as song titles. So I come to you with a quiz. In the spirit of wine.
The puns.
So I called my quiz The Spirits of Music. And the idea here is you have to tell me whether the word or phrase that I tell you is the name of a cocktail or the name of a hit song from the top 100 list from the year 2000. So it's a hit song from the top 100 in the year 2000, or it's a cocktail. And
this is hilarious.
You get bonus points if you can tell me the artist or the contents of the drink. Number 1, Bent.
Bent?
Four letters. Bent.
I'm gonna say that's a song.
Do you know by who?
No.
Okay. It is a song. It's by Matchbox 20. Number 2, Joker.
A song.
Do you know by who?
No.
It's not a song. No, it's a drink. Actually, a really weird drink. I can't imagine how this would work. It's got several different contents, that's different drinks by the same name. But here's the one I found most interesting. It's a mixture of orange liqueur, vodka, fizzy orange drink, lemonade, and eggnog. I don't know how the eggnog doesn't curdle, but doesn't sound very pleasant. All right.
No.
Number 3. No more.
No more.
No more.
A drink.
Oh, it's a song, and I didn't ask you the contents. But regardless, it is a song by Rough Ends. Rough Ends with a Z. Never heard of them. So I'm not a big music fan, you see, so I don't know most of this stuff.
Yeah, and this was 13 years ago.
Well, I thought maybe, I don't know how you stand 13 years ago in music.
About where I stand now.
So number 4, Prairie Fire.
All right, Fire. That's a song, right?
Do you know by who?
I don't.
Well, it's a drink, so it wouldn't have an author.
I'm sure there's a song called Fire.
Prairie Fire. The whole thing was Prairie Fire.
Oh, I missed that. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry. Well, that was unfair, but regardless, it's a mixture of hot sauce and whiskey.
I kind of would have expected that.
Yeah,
that
fair
sounds,
enough. Yeah. Sounds about right. All right.
Yeah.
Number 5, Hurricane.
I'm going to say it's a drink.
It is a drink. It contains rum.
I want to guess.
All right.
What
What else does it have?
Rum.
Yeah.
And coconut juice.
Nope.
Oh.
Well, kind of.
Okay.
It says fruit juice. Any fruit juice would do. So I think coconut's a fruit.
Okay. I was going to say pineapple.
It's got one other ingredient. Can you guess it? It's a common ingredient in cocktails.
A little umbrella.
Grenadine. Number 7, Kryptonite.
That's a song by Three Doors Down.
You got it. Bonus
Yes.
points. Nice.
Yes, I did know that song. I had that on my iPod at one point.
That is awesome. I'm glad you got the whole thing. All right. Number 8, Brass Monkey.
A drink.
Do you know what the contents of this drink are? If it is in fact a drink.
Brass Monkey. What's brassy? Some sort of whiskey?
No.
Oh. All right, I give up.
Okay, well, it is a drink. It's a mixture of rum, vodka, and orange juice. So it's like a screwdriver with rum. All right, we got 2 more. So next one is called Big Pimpin'. Pimpin' with
song.
an apostrophe.
I'm going to say that's a song.
You're saying it's a song. Do you have a guess by who?
Nope. Not a
All
clue.
right. Big Pimpin' is a song by Jay-Z. The answer was Jay-Z. All right.
The answer's always Jay-Z.
So number 10, the last
one?
Purist of Pain.
I could see this going either way, but I don't think you would end on a trick, so I'm going to say it's a drink.
It is a song.
Oh, no.
It's by Sun by 4, which I'm not sure is actually a thing, but anyway. So you did pretty well in that quiz. I didn't keep track, because I don't ever. But yeah, that's a interesting quiz.
I got that one. I got Kryptonite.
Yeah. No,
although I could see that being a drink too. Like all those could totally
yeah.
be.
Well, I had to pick the drinks that sounded like songs and the songs that sounded like drinks. So that they all sort of sound kind of like each other.
That's fun though. Well, that's our show. Email comments and questions to mindthegaphosts@gmail.com. Our next show will be called Quackropractic. Subscribe to us on YouTube, iTunes, or the podcast feed of your choice. And also be sure to like or rate us depending on your platform. Thanks for listening.
Nothing tastes as good as that sip of wine that you know could have inoculated an infant against tuberculosis.